Also, we are welcoming everyone for the second session of our Innovative Material for Sustainable Future Symposium. And in this session, we will be having three distinguished speakers. We will start with Professor Beller, who has studied chemistry at the University of Göttingen, where he completed his PhD thesis in 1989. As recipient of Liebig Scholarship, he then spent 1 year with Sharpless at MIT. Afterward, he worked in industry until 1995. After that, he moved to TU of Munich as a professor for inorganic chemistry. In 1998, he relocated to Rostock to head the Institute for Organic Catalysis, which became in 2006 the Leibniz-Institut for Katalysis. The work of his group has been published in more than 1,000 original publications, reviewed more than 150 patent applications that he has filed, and Professor Beller was honored with a number of awards, including the Otto Rolim Medal, the Leibniz Prize, and the German Federal Cross of Merit. Besides, he received the first European Prize for Sustainable Chemistry, the Paul Relander Awards of the Organic Reaction Catalysis Society of the USA, the Gail Lussac Alexander von Humboldt Prize of the French Academy of Science, and the Emil Fischer Medal of the German Chemical Society. Moreover, he was awarded an honorary doctoral degree from the University of Antwerp and the University of Rennes. He received the whole prize for sustainable chemistry from the German Chemistry Society and the ERC Advanced Grant from the European Commission. In 2017, Professor Beller was awarded the Carl Ziegler Prize from the German Chemical Society and the Carl Ziegler Foundation, one of the highest honors in the field of chemistry in Germany. He has received as the first European chemist with ACS Catalysis Award lectureship last year. Professor Beller was selected as a prestigious Hassel lecturer from the University of Oslo and the Gordon Stone lecturership of the University of Bristol as well. Beller is Vice President of Leibniz Society and member of German National Academy of Science, Ljubljana, and 3 other academic of science. Excuse me if I pronounce some of those not correct. The floor is yours and you can share your screen.
Thank you very much, Professor Abu Saud, for this very kind introduction. It's an honor to participate, and again, I apologize. I will, because the talk is planned for 45 minutes, I will be a little bit faster so that we have time for discussion also enough. And I would like to thank also, of course, Professor Abdul Aziz Al-Sadi for the kind invitation. It's really a pleasure. I remember very well my visit to the university, and it was a real honor. And it was a real pleasure. So I would like to talk to you today about the influence specifically of ligands in catalysis, because as we all know, ligands, they modulate catalysts. They are, I would say, they allow for tailoring and tuning catalytic behavior, and therefore they are one of the most important components of catalysts, but they are often underestimated in their importance. So I hope you can see my slide now.
Yes, it's clear, thank you.
So, and let me start with a very general, brief remark or introduction. So as we all know, in more than 80% of all chemical processes, if we look at the modern processes, it's more than 90% in industry are run with catalysts. So catalysis is extremely important for practical chemistry, for industrial chemistry, but not only, also in our daily life. If you look around yourself, there is very few products which have not been made without the help of catalysts. In addition, in our body, all the time, biochemical reactions take place, biocatalytic reactions take place, and also there, the biocatalysts, proteins, are crucial for our behavior, for our well-being, and so on. So catalysis is really of tremendous importance for our society and our economy. There is a constant need, although catalysis is older than now 150 years as a science, there is a constant need for new catalysts, because catalysts allow to improve a certain transformation, and they, I would say, the key components also for controlling efficiency of chemical reactions and also the price of the products in some extent. Traditionally, catalytic synthesis is, or catalysis synthesis, catalyst synthesis is a very empirical science. And I will start with an explanation also with that. And traditionally, and if you look, for example, at the development of the Haber-Bosch catalyst for ammonia synthesis, 10,000 of materials had to be synthesized initially to find, let's say, a suitable catalyst, which allowed for that important reaction. Despite 100 years of improving methodologies, knowledge, and so on, still catalysis is to a significant extent an empirical sciences. And I will start with my first example, but not without actually thanking the group who has done all this work. This is the research group before COVID times. The work which I will present, you see the people highlighted here in yellow colors. They have provided, I would say, the main aspects of the work I will show you on the next slides. So let me start with a first example. In fact, it's not a homogeneous catalyst, it's a heterogeneous catalyst. This is a heterogeneous catalyst material. And I'm not sure if you have already suspects what type of material this can be. I can tell you it's a very common catalyst used for many transformations, both in industry and in academia. It has been developed in the 1920s, 30s, so it's more than 100 years old. And as you can see, it heavily reacts when it is exposed to air. The catalyst I'm talking about is Ranne nickel, one of the most, let's say, common heterogeneous catalysts for hydrogenation reactions. And it's a very reliable catalyst. It's a very cheap catalyst, but as you see, safety is not, I would say, it's not a very safe catalyst if you do not handle the catalyst appropriately. So the reason why we became interested in developing more safe or better, let's say, nickel catalysts as a replacement for Ranne nickel are the safety issues concerned with the Ranne nickel catalyst. But also, I would say, the catalyst efficiency. On this slide, you see a brief, let's say, history of the development of the Ranne nickel catalyst by Murray Ranne. If you have any questions to that, I'm more than happy to answer that at the ending. I will, in order to save a little bit time, I will directly move on to our research development. And this research project, which is which we started a few years ago, is, I would say, a typical project where the catalyst was developed in some sort of empirical manner. And therefore, I'm choosing this as a first example, also showing you that this empirical development still is valid today and can be used today. So what we did is we prepared a number of specific materials, heterogeneous ones, which we thought could be active in hydrogenation catalysis. And then we choose 3 types of model reactions, which are typically known for the runny nickel catalyst to work well. And we study the different material behavior for these different model reactions. An important point to replace the classical runny nickel is really not to look here at only one catalytic transformation, but at several in order to have a general replacement for the runny nickel catalyst. And the only material among many others, which are not shown here on this slide, which was able to do reactions in a similar efficiency to the runny nickel catalyst is this type here of nickel, specific nickel catalyst, nickel nanoparticles supported on silica. So, the interesting thing of this catalytic material was is discovered when we looked more carefully to the material by various analytic techniques. While classical nickel nanoparticles on carbon, on other materials, formed nickel zero metal nanoparticles with varying sizes, this specific material behaved somehow different. In fact, if you look at the surface of the catalyst material, then you observe different phases of nickel silicides on the surface. And this was very surprising for us because we didn't expect to form nickel silicides in this reaction. Or we didn't expect the formation to be taking place. The reason how these nickel silicides are formed is the presence of the nickel nanoparticles with organic reductants, which we used as a ligand, here phenanthroline, for example, at high pyrolysis temperature. High pyrolysis temperature means 1000 degrees. At this temperature, the nickel nanoparticles are formed by reduction of nickel 2 from the phenanthroline species. Phenanthroline acts as a reductant, and the surplus of the reductant in the presence of the nickel nanoparticle then reduces silica to silicide. So in fact, we are reducing here silicon dioxide to metal silicides, of course, at high temperature. But if you look more carefully into the known literature on formation of nickel or metal silicides, then typically much higher temperatures are needed for this type of, to prepare this type of materials. The nickel silicides, in fact, they show a very distinctive catalytic behavior. So somehow similar to the runny nickel, where you have, as you might know, we have this nickel alloy structure on alumina, and the catalytic behavior of this nickel alloy structure is resembled here by the nickel silicides. The nice thing of the nickel silicide is that it's stable at air and at ambient conditions, for example, at temperature. So you can simply put these catalytic materials on shelf. You don't need to put them in water like runny nickel and then remove the water and expose and create potential safety dangers. You can simply handle them on air. And when we looked more carefully into the generality of this catalyst, it behaves very much, in fact, like runny nickel. And you see here a few examples of the catalytic behavior. So I will not go more into detail. I could give a whole talk of this and related materials, but I want to talk more about ligands today. And this example, the previous example I've showed you only in order to show you that catalysis development is still a very empirical factor. Now I'd like to move on, and I'd like to convince you, when you know more about the catalytic process, that you are able to develop actually catalysts in a more rational manner. And my first example is, in fact, an example where 2 pilot plants have been built together with an industrial partner. We were asked several years ago to develop the process you will see on the next slides. And I have to clearly state here, the catalyst was developed in some sort of rational manner. Before I go into detail, just some brief remarks. What are the key parameters you need to keep in mind if you really want to apply a catalyst on an industrial scale? So if you develop catalysts for the pharmaceutical or agrochemical industry, then of course, let's say the turnover numbers and the turnover frequencies, the activity, don't have to be so high. They should be nevertheless more than 1,000. If you're applying at least, I would say, noble metals or even non-noble metals with more sophisticated ligands. But if you're working on bulk scale, petrochemical refinery, bulk products on more than a 100,000 ton scale, you really have to have very efficient catalysts. And this is, here you see basically the reaction, the technology, which we were following to develop a new catalyst actually for the production of 1-octene. I think some of you will know 1-octene was one of the fastest growing organic chemicals in the past decade, because the addition of hexene or octene to ethylene in the polymerization process significantly improves the property of these materials. And as I said, some years ago, we were asked by an industrial company to develop an improved catalyst for this transformation. 1-octene can be prepared by ethylene trimerization of 1-hexene or tetramerization 1-octene. This is, I believe, also studied in Saudi Arabia by SABIC, I think mainly. However, there is also the possibility to selectively produce 1-octene by dimerization of butadiene. And this is the process you've seen here. It's called a telomerization reaction, which has been initially discovered by Japanese scientists in the 1970s. And if you look, I will not go into the details of this catalytic process. The most important thing for you is the following. You start with 2 butadiene molecules, and you end up basically with these dimerized telomeres, are they called? Initially, there's a dimerization of the butadiene, then you add methanol. You have various, I would say, selectivities in this process, which you have to take into consideration. But from a catalytic point of view, the most important point is all of the time, you basically have only one ligand controlling the selectivity of the reactor. And this type of catalysis is very well, I would say, patented also by Dow Chemicals, who have a process in industry in this, or who have an industrial process on this chemistry in Tarragona in Spain, where they make use of a specific phosphine ligand. And because Dow has patented this area very well with phosphine ligands, we basically didn't want to use any phosphine ligand in this type of chemistry, because otherwise we would have been relying on the Dow patents. So patents can also inspire your research, because we were not allowed actually to use phosphine ligands. So our idea, which looks at first sight a little bit strange, was, I would say, was a pure rational development. And I would like to explain this to you. So if you look at the slide before, at this at this reaction, then the key point of this chemistry is you have one ligand coordinating to the palladium, and then you have a 1,6 diester. This is the product complex of the reaction. And if you look at the catalyst which we came up with, they resemble very much this product complex. This is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1,6 diene structure, and we have a strongly coordinating carbene ligand. And these complexes have been synthesized for the first time by us already 20 years ago. They were the first also stable monocarbene palladium complexes, palladium 0 complexes. They can be prepared very easily from commercial solution, which is used for commercial automotive catalysts. This solution is simply treated with carbene ligands, and if you use this commercial solution, the corresponding products very often simply crystallize directly out of solution. So it was a very easy way to synthesize analogs of the product complex. And if you want to develop, this is now my suggestion, if you want to develop new catalysts for a certain reaction, look at the catalytic intermediates of your catalytic cycle, probably use stable intermediates as defined catalyst precursors, or you use the product complex, and then you can study in a systematic manner the reaction. And this we did. The overall process is shown here. I show you only the data for the dimerization reaction. So the catalyst has a tremendous turnover number, productivity more than 1 million. It has a very high turnover frequency. In our hands, better than the phosphine ligands. And this chemistry has been done on 25,000 kilogram scale, 25, so on multiple 10-ton scale. In the end, it was not realized by our partner because they used butadiene, which had they available in the end for another process. So technically, this reaction, I still believe, is feasible. It has advantages compared to the classical palladium phosphine systems. And it offers, I would say, a very efficient way to make, let's say, 1-octene from this compound. At this point, a short remark to the students. When we started this project, we were no experts in telomerization chemistry. And if you have some interesting new materials, because I know at your place very interesting materials are made, and if you have some ideas to try them in interesting applications, even if you're not an expert in that application, do it. Because through this testing, you will acquire additional knowledge. I think you have the possibility to be really innovative and to create something new. And you don't have to be professional at a certain reaction from the very beginning on. You can learn these things. It's not so difficult. So let me come to my third and last example, which is also the longest one, because this is our most recent example. And I think I try to show you now how nowadays we try to develop defined catalysts in a rational manner. And the reaction I'm talking about is an example also, as mentioned in the abstract of my talk, about carbonylation chemistry. Carbonylation chemistry is a key technology in industry for synthesizing all kinds of alcohols, carboxylic acid derivatives, and amines. Because CO is an extremely cheap C1 unit. It's available from fossil, but also renewable resources. And there is several, let's say, catalytic process run with synthesis gas on very large scale. So the reactions and the technology and the existing catalysts have been proven industrially reliable. The catalyst development I'm talking in this final part is a catalyst development for the carbonylation of ethylene. In fact, the alkoxy carbonylation of ethylene, this is also an industrial process. The overall chemistry originates from the work of Walter Reppe at BASF in the 1940s. Since then, he used nickel at that time. This I would not recommend today because of the toxicity of nickel carbonyl compounds. Today's state-of-the-art catalysts for this type of chemistry, alkoxy carbonylation, are based on palladium. And there is one specific ligand which has also last year been summarized in a very nice, I would say, review article in Chemical Reviews. This is the so-called lucite ligand. It's some sort of magic ligand for this type of chemistry, works very efficient. And if you consider the price of methyl methacrylate, which is not very high, in fact, you can, and if you look at this fairly complicated phosphine, which is relatively expensive, you can imagine that the chemistry is really, let's say, very efficient. To date, there is 2 plants existing, one in Saudi Arabia also doing this chemistry. To my knowledge, a 3rd plant is under construction at the moment. So this is very valuable chemistry. We entered this area from our knowledge of hydroformylation chemistry, because we're doing hydroformylation chemistry, working on research on hydroformylation chemistry for more than 20 years. And there is a specific feedstock for hydroformylation, which is called dibutene. You see, this is an analysis of the industrial dibutene mixture. And as you can see, it's a fairly complicated mixture of all kinds of dimers of butene. It's not only, let's say, octenes, linear ones, it's many branch compounds, methylheptenes, dimethylhexenes, and so on. And specifically, the highly branched tri- and tetrasubstituted olefins, they have very low reactivity, as we all know from the general reactivity of olefins, for example, in hydrogenation or also in carbonylation chemistry. Ethylene is always the fastest, and the lowest reactivity are tetrasubstituted. So in fact, today, by knowledge, there is no catalyst known which allows for a direct alkoxy carbonylation or hydroformylation of tetrasubstituted olefins, except, let's say, our palladium-based system, which I will present you on the next slides. So how did we approach this problem? Of course, you can do a lot of trial and error, and I'm convinced you will. This is a lottery game. You can be successful, but the chances for success are very low. So in order to develop more rationally a catalyst, you should understand what is the limitation of the existing catalyst and the chemistry. And if you look at the carbonylation of tetrasubstituted olefins, then it's clear that the carbonylation of the internal carbon is very difficult, because there is very few stable internal metal carbon species known, stable, and existing of this format. On the other hand, I'm showing this here for palladium, but other metals it's true. But on the other hand, this type of terminal metal carbon species, it's much more well known, and there is hundreds of examples. So although it looks very similar and only a small difference, this is very well established. This is not existing, at least it has not been proven in a stable form. Nevertheless, we know that there is metal hydride species, iridium, for example. This is the iridium catalyzed hydrogenation of tetrasubstituted olefins, which are able to add a metal hydride to tetrasubstituted olefins. And therefore, we thought if we have a very active metal hydride with palladium as the carbonylation catalyst, it should be possible to generate this in situ. And if we generate this in situ, then even if it's not reacting, it will most likely undergo the well accepted or well understood better hydride elimination. It can form the thermodynamically product back, but it also will give you this one. This is much more reactive than the original olefin, will form this one. And as I said, this chemistry is very well known and precedented, so it should be no problem to go to this. So we studied initially, we looked for metal catalysts which are able to allow for this step, because we thought this is the difficult step. And how can you approach this? So what we did is we tested, we thought the most active catalyst, palladium hydride catalysts, which we could imagine for this chemistry. So we used the lucite ligand, we used the Drent ligand developed at Shell, we used many others, but they all were unsuccessful. And they only gave the corresponding ether, which simply forms by acid catalyzed a reaction, because as you know from basic organic chemistry, this forms a stable carbenium ion, and then this reacts very easily. So if we would have not, let's say, looked more carefully into the process, the story would be over now. No active catalyst. So then we try to understand why the palladium hydride is not adding to the corresponding olefin. And we did in situ spectroscopy measurements, various types. And surprisingly, in these in situ spectroscopy measurements, we developed or observed that in the presence of lucite, we observed metal acyl species. Not the product, but metal acyl species. And this was very surprising to us, because if we observe this type of species, this reaction is not the problem with this ligand. And in order to prove that, we thought if we really get this species, we have to improve this step. And this is a simple, let's say, base catalyzed addition to a metal acyl species. And so we did various things, added base and so on to improve that. And then Helfried Neumann in my group synthesized a ligand which actually helps in this rate determining step. And the ligand I will show you on the next slide, you can imagine the function of that ligand similar to what the ants are doing with the stick here. If you have only, let's say, the metal center, a very strong ant, it will not be able most of the time to move it. If you have additional functions in your catalytic system, then it will be possible. And this is exactly what we did. We added additional catalytic function into the ligand. So now the ligand not only becomes a stabilizer of the metal center and a controller of the electronics of the metal, but it really takes place in the catalysis. And what we did is we added basic sites into the lucite ligand. And as you can see, the chemistry completely changes. While all of the other ligands, which you see here, gave the ether, as soon as you use this ligand or the metal complexes of this ligand, the reaction completely changes and you form this product. And this is not really a little bit, it's the chemistry, it's like a game changer. It completely changes everything. So this is also one take-home message. Very subtle changes in your catalyst, in your ligand structure, if they have a real function, can completely change the outcome and the selectivity of your chemical transformation. It not only changes the outcome, it also improves, let's say, known reactions. And this is now because of the basic site, one of the crucial reaction steps in the catalytic cycle of the alkoxy carbonylation is improved by the basic site. So the activity of the catalyst also is much higher in other reactions. So this is the commercial carbonylation of ethylene. In an industrial setup, of course, it's not done at room temperature, but we did it at room temperature in order to show the difference more clearly. You see the activity of the pyridyl substituted Upox ligand is much, much higher. So the Ligands ligand, how we call him now, also allows complete conversion more than 97% conversion of dibutene, while the classical lucide ligand only allows 60% of conversion of the dibutene. And this, I didn't mention that this dibutene feedstock is produced on a 1 million ton scale. So it's significant if you have high efficiency. So what is the role of this basic side? The role of this basic side is not simple. It's not as simple, it's only a base. It's multifold, to be clear here. And I'd like also, if you have questions to that, I'm more than happy to go more into detail during the discussion. I just want to mention 3 points here. On the one hand, it improves, of course, the deprotonation of methanol. This step, of course, but it also stabilizes the catalyst system. Additionally, it allows, finally, it also allows for, it both stabilizes the metal zero particles as well as the corresponding metal hydride particles. And calculations showed very clearly that the metal hydride on the palladium is somewhat in between the palladium center and the corresponding amine. And in this way, it can be also easily transferred to the olefin. So when we have this new ligand, then there is always many possibilities. I will show you that for basic chemistry, it offers many possibilities, but also for previously not possible reactions. One of the, I would say, challenging reactions in carbonylation chemistry for a very long time was direct dicarbonylation of butadiene to nylon precursors. And because of the increased activity of the system, we thought it offers a new handle also to tackle this very complicated reaction. And here you can see the complicated actually reaction set up, or the reaction set which this double carbonylation has as a background. And there's many possibilities. So testing this type of ligands, this is the lucide ligand. You see the reactivity is too low for an industrial product. It has nice selectivity, but the reactivity is too low. Steric modification doesn't change much things. Electronically, the aliphatic phosphines are very important. Our ligand, again, is much more active than the lucide ligand, but the selectivity was not good in this case. So we had significant amount of branched diacid. And that's, of course, not useful for making adipic acid. And if you see this ligand has 2 pyridyl ligands, this has none, we thought the sterics is very important. The increased sterics of this system is very important to get the selectivity, and the presence of the pyridyl unit is very important for the activity. So what if we build a ligand which is in between these two things, still has the increased sterics, but also have this ligand? And this is the Hemaraphos built by G for the first time. And as you can see, it combines the best of 2 worlds. Still has high reactivity compared, similar, I would say, to the Ligands ligand, but it also has very nice selectivity like the lucide ligand. And with this ligand, you can see we did in our laboratories on 1 liter scale type, 2 liter scale type reactions, and we are now building at the moment in our laboratories a small continuous plant for doing this reaction on a larger scale. The turnover numbers, I just want to highlight this, also can go up to several 10,000. We are still working on improvement. You can use many other 1 and 2 dienes in this type of chemistry, which might be also interesting of synthesis. So the ligand, to be very clear, I would say, or the catalyst came up through a process through rational thinking. And for this rational thinking, mechanistic understanding and basic science are important. Still, there is open questions. The lucide ligand, for example, works quite well also with higher alcohols. Methanol, I showed you the results, because dimethyl adipate is an important intermediate, works not very well with the ligand. Under these conditions here, in comparison, it basically gave no reactions. However, under the same conditions, when you use butanol, the reaction works very well. And this is a very unusual solvent effect. And we still don't understand completely, let's say, the reactivity switch, which we have because of the solvent effect. Nevertheless, you can use this also to develop an active system with the lucite ligand, even for the even to make methyl adipate, simply by decreasing the polarity of the methanol solvent by adding a non-polar solvent like toluene, for example. In addition to dienes, you can use allylic alcohols from renewables to make such reactions. So you can build adipates from renewables by double carbonylation processes. In a similar manner, we have a whole nowadays toolbox of these ligands available in our laboratories. We synthesized some of the ligands you see here on the slide, but even more. And we compared them with reactivity behavior for the different reactions I've shown you. And at the very end now of my talk, in the last 2 or 3 minutes, I'd like to show you a little bit that these ligands, or this class of ligands, also allow for very interesting basic synthetic applications. Making aldehydes in organic chemistry is very interesting. There is this nice work saying by Phil Kuczynski, British chemist, that there is no other organic functional group which matches the carbonyl group with respect to versatility and utility. You can do so many things with carbonyl groups. And indeed, you can do many things, let's say, in carbonylation reactions. Here is an example of fluorinated olefins. You can do the corresponding fluorinated carboxylic acids, which are interesting for drugs and for the development of new drugs because of the increased metabolic stability. There's a huge interest in these type of fluorinated molecules, specifically for life science applications. In this case, the lucite ligand also works very well in this type of chemistry. You can both carbonylate aromatic olefins and aliphatic ones. You can do carbonylation, new type of carbonylation of alkynes, alkenols, for example. Again, these are motifs which are of interest for fine chemicals and pharmaceuticals. And depending on the type of catalyst you are using, specifically the ligand type, you can, let's say, from the same type of substrate, here alkenols as an example, you can synthesize all these different compound classes in basically one step, only changing the catalyst. And I will show you here only one, this is the last synthetic example, also only one unusual reaction. What we discovered very recently, also from the standpoint of basic chemistry, I think quite interesting, because if you look at the substrates and the carbon atoms of the substrate, and then if you look at the carbon atoms of your product in this carbonylation process with the corresponding ligands, a cleavage of the carbon-carbon triple bond, one of the most stable, let's say, bonds which we can imagine, takes place, and the two carbons relocate at completely different, or at two different positions in the corresponding products. If you're interested in this mechanism, ask me in the discussion. I will be more than happy to elaborate a little bit more on that. I have 4 take-home messages. Still, screening of catalysts can be an option for catalyst development, but it's traditional and you can do better, I'm convinced. Even though this way is still often, I would say, simply done by many people because it's so easy. To develop in a more rational way catalysts, you should be inspired from intermediates of the respective catalytic cycle. And therefore, understanding of the catalysis and of the catalytic cycle is crucial. If you want to develop an improved catalyst, identify the rate determining step. And if you know the rate determining step, you can use multifunctionality principles to improve this step. And then you become a more efficient, better catalyst. Mechanistic work, although often people in industry think it's useless, it's a great source of inspiration and can stimulate creativity for not only catalyst development, but also for making interesting synthetic organic chemistry and so on. This I wanted to tell you. I apologize again for joining somewhat late. I thank the organizers again. I would like to finish with this statement which resembles a statement of John Kennedy. Often people outside of science, they think science only costs money, but if there is no science and education, that is much, much more expensive than investment in science and education. Thank you very much. I'm more than happy to discuss with you some interesting questions. You are still muted.
Thank you very much. Sorry for that. We have here some questions. I have a question from Dr. Bassam Al-Ali. He's asking, what makes the nickel supported much more air stable than the nickel 2 complex? What type of ligand can stabilize better the homogeneous nickel complex?
So I see so what makes the nickel supported much more air stable? The nice thing with the nickel supported catalyst, that's right. The nickel silicide, they are embedded in the silica framework, so it's not so exposed, and the nickel silicon bond is also relatively stable. It's more stable than the pure nickel 0 species. So the nickel silicide is really I would say it's significantly more stable than the classical nickel 0 complexes or the nickel alloys, for example. The nickel silicon bond is not so weak or not so as one expects.
Thank you very much. So, and another question, why phosphine is a must in the selective carbonylation process?
Yeah, very good question. In fact, it's not a must. It depends on the carbonylation process and of course on the catalyst. Traditional chemistry makes use of non-phosphine based systems, so the metal carbonyl hydrides. This is they work well under drastic conditions. So in principle, you only need for an active carbonyl catalyst, you need only two things. You need a metal hydride bond and you need a metal carbonyl bond. And then in principle, any type of this, any compound of that type can do carbonylation. The phosphines are so dominant in this type of chemistry because they form relatively stable complexes, but they are also dynamic. So you have mixtures of phosphine carbonyl, so they rely, so you have the possibility to tune things, because if you have if the ligand would bound too strongly, you would have no CO present. If the ligand would bound too weak, you have no, let's say, influence. So they balance, the phosphine balance. But there is other possibilities. In hydroformylation chemistry, for example, the phosphines do not dominate, it's phosphides, for example, which are also more cheap than phosphines, but again, it's phosphorus based. But there is also some carbonylation known with nitrogen-based ligands.
Here's another question. How to synthesize the active ligand you are using in the methoxycarbonylation of 2-butene?
dibutene dimerization. Yeah. So what we did in this case is we can easily synthesize the palladium-2 complexes. You use any palladium-2 salt, and you can react this in solution with the phosphine ligand. Then you get a palladium-2 phosphine complex. This is of course not the active complex because you need the hydride. So but you can study the complexes. You can form the palladium hydride when you use the palladium-0 complex, palladium DBA, for example. The palladium DBA complex, you react with the ligand, you form the palladium-0 complex, and if you add hydrogen to this palladium-0 complex, then you form the palladium hydride. You hydrogenate the DBA and you form the palladium hydride.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beller, for your interesting talk today, and we really appreciate your presence and looking forward to seeing you soon, inshallah.
Thank you very much.
We wish you a happy day and a nice weekend.
Thank you. I will continue staying in the session if it's possible.
Yeah, for sure, sure. Our pleasure. It's our pleasure. So our second distinguished professor is Professor Sheikh Ashrof Ali from KFUPM. He is a distinguished professor in chemistry and affiliate of Interdisciplinary Research Center for Advanced Material in KFUPM. Professor Ali received his PhD degree from State University of New York at Buffalo. He has carried out postdoctorate research at MIT. He is a subject editor of Arabian Journal of Science and Engineering. He began his independent career at KFUPM, where he is currently holding the position of a distinguished professor. His research interests range from developing a new material for water purification, demulsification, hydraulic fracturing, aqueous two-phase system, kinetic hydrate, scale and corrosion inhibitors to organic synthesis and polymer synthesis involving a cyclopolymerization protocol. He has supervised 14 MS and 12 PhD theses, published over 245 journal articles. He is the lead inventor of 28 US patents, and I'm so proud to be one of his students when I was in my undergraduate. Dr. Sheikh, it's all yours.
So my talk is about innovative advanced materials, which has many applications for the sustainable development of human society. And that advanced materials is developed to fulfill various demands, including environmental protection. I will be mainly focusing on deuteranic materials. They have strong dipole moments, but a highly charged group, but are still charged neutral. And that unique molecular structure leads to many encouraging applications. The outline of my talk is on synthesis and application. I will talk a little bit about the subtitle, aqueous two-phase polymer system, corrosion inhibition, antiscalant kinetic hydrate inhibitors, zeolite template, and water treatment. Now, you see, we are talking about Butler cyclopolymerization. What is Butler cyclopolymerization? It is here diallyl ammonium salt that can go to cyclic polymer, or you can sulfur dioxide. It can go to an alternate cyclopolymer. That means this ring and the sulfur dioxide alternate. It cannot add on to itself. They proceed by intra and intermolecular chain propagation. So you have a homopolymer, you have an alternate copolymer. Now, here we have a diallyl amine salt. I can make a homopolymer 4 or 5, or with malic acid, it can give us a alternate, again alternate like sulfur dioxide. Ring, malic acid, ring, malic acid, this alternate polymerization will undergo and give us water-soluble polymers. Now, here we will tell you that this ring backbone, our synthesis can create cationic charges or anionic charges or zwitterionic or ampholytic, all kinds of backbone, ionic backbone we can create. And in that process, we have synthesized many polymers and copolymers as given here. And you can see here, this one, it has a aspartic acid residues from amino acid aspartic acid. And this one is from glutamic acid, and we got a polymer containing residues of glutamic acid. They are pH responsive. You can say this, you can take this hydrogen, CO2 minus, CO2H, all these are pH responsive. Now, you see, if you take one of this system, like this polymer we made, and we take polyethylene glycol, and when you add them into the water, both of them are water soluble. But in water, it is rather, it is not an exception. It is the reality that they developed into two phases. One is rich in this polymer, another is rich in polyethylene glycol. We have developed many aqueous two-phase system where we can inject biomolecules like proteins, and they will, if you have a mixture of proteins, it is expected that one of them will go to one of this layer, one of this anionic, it has a amino acid residues of glutamic acid, and here you have polyethylene glycol. So the protein will selectively go into one layer that will help us separate the biomolecules. Now you have another one here with a dendrimeric pendants. And these dendrimeric pendants can increase viscosity tremendously. And that could be used in high temperature hydraulic fracturing applications. Now I will take you to another thing here. You see, when you have a hydrophobe that is single tail or double tailed or triple chain, you can see here these pendants. You have single chain, double chain, triple chain. Now that is what gives higher association with another chain, because these hydrophobes can associate with other chains, and that will amplify the viscosity profile. Now I want to show you here, these reds are all hydrophobes, but they will come back to associate, resulting in tremendous increase of viscosity. It is a three-dimensional physical crosslink, and that will be helpful in viscosification in oil field, where we can use it as fracturing fluids. Now I want to take you back to this cyclopolymerization, and this you can see we have used different monomers to get a cyclic, to get a polymer that backbone contains carboxylate, phosphonate, sulfonate, and an amine group. And this amine group can react with this carbonyl to give a cross-link polymer, and that gives us this cross-link polymer, and here it is number 11 that contains this cross-link and this CO2 minus, sulfonate, phosphonate, everything is here. Now why we do that? We do that people can remove a lot of mercury and lead, high concentration, but we are working for low concentration. And the World Health Organization says that we want in future mercury to not ppb, even 0 ppb. So here we are trying to use that hydrogel to remove mercury, and it can remove to ppb and sub ppb levels. That is WHO goal. And this is here, this has done a tremendous job with so many minus here, from phosphonate, carboxylate, and you have sulfonate, and you have CO2 minus in another chain, and they can all augment this capturing of mercury, and we have been able to get it to down to sub ppb levels. Now, I want to take you to another cross-linked polymer. This is here, this is the monomer, and this is the polymer. This is the cross-linker, these white rings, this cross-linker. So it becomes cross-linked. And I want to tell you here, this is the cross-linker here. Now I want to take you, using this cross-linker again, this is a number one is derived from amino acid methionine. And that gives us this cross-linked polymer, which have a nitrogen H+, and you have a sulfide, CO2 minus. And they are, again, very successful in removing mercury at ppb levels. Now, likewise, we have done this thing, this cross-linked polymer, which has a pendant here, biphenyl, and this biphenyl can take organic contaminants, and these groups here, phosphonate and all these things, they can take care of mercury. You can see here methylene blue is cationic, and at pH, if this is here, it is absorbed. But if I go to change it to high pH, then everything will be positive here, and that will repel the positive methylene blue. And you can see here methylene blue is on the top aqueous layer. So at lower pH, at higher pH, you can, because higher pH has minus, that will take the plus, and it is here, resin is capturing methylene blue. But if you want to recycle it, then decrease the pH, and decrease the pH will make it all cationic, and that will repel the methylene blue. And then I can show you another one here that is capable of removing chromium, and at the same time it can remove methylene blue with the help of this pendant, hydrophobic pendant that can interact with the methylene blue, and chromium with this chelating moiety of aminophosphonate. Now here, this one, we see here, they have all three functionalities, CO2 minus, phosphonate, sulfonate, they are all chelating motifs that can capture priority metal contaminants. And here is another one. You can see that it has a glutamic acid residue, and it has a hydrophobic pendant, and they can simultaneously trap chromium and eriochrome black tea, EBT, that is also a dye. And here is the chromium coming, and this is how the dye comings, and we can remove them. Now, here we want to tell you another amino acid, which is glycine and malic acid copolymer cross-linked. And this can take out the methylene blue, and this group can take out the mercury. You see the methylene blue absorption capacity is 2101 milligram per gram, and it can remove mercury 263 milligram per gram of the resin. Now, I want to take you to the phosphonate and malic acid copolymer with the cross-linker, and that can remove 2,445 milligram of the cationic methylene blue within 5 minutes. And lead concentration is reduced from 200 ppb to 3.8 ppb. That happens within a minute. And that is a great achievement. We are talking about 2,445. Such a high adsorption capacity, we term this resin a super adsorbent. Now here another one, this is from aspartic acid, and you can see here, this is the maximum we got among all the resins we developed, 2,609 milligram. You can take activated charcoal and other things, they will hardly take 50 to 60 milligrams. But here, 2,609, and lead, it can take 873 milligram per gram. It can remove eriochrome black tea 91%. This is an anionic dye, and it can remove a basic cationic dye, rosanilin hydrochloride, 1,534 milligram per gram. So this is very nice. Now, what is our goal we are working on? We are working on this molecule cyclodextrin. If there is a selective tosylation with diethylamine, we will get this molecule. And that will give us this kind of, we have synthesized this resin that containing phosphonate and containing aspartic, and this is yes, the cyclodextrin cavity. And what is our goal? This is just synthesized. We are experimenting it, that this bucket can take organic contaminants, and these things can take care of the priority metal contaminants. And this is here another one. This is catechol, dopamine derived. With cationic, we can get cationic polymer. With anionic monomer, we can get anionic, and they can combine together to give a coadsorvate. Complex coadsorption, because they will precipitate out cationic and anionic, and that will have a lot of dopamine catechol moieties that can do their job, like attaching onto the surface like a molecular sieves, adhesives. Now, I will take you to corrosion. In the acid pickling, you see that the pipelines get corroded, and that's why we need to inhibit this corrosion in acidic medium. We developed first time, introduced into the literature, the isoxazoline motifs as a corrosion inhibition motifs. First time we introduced. We produced several groups, several isoxazolines, several. Now, the beauty of isoxazoline moiety is that it is compared to trimethylamine, it's very poor base. But due to so much lone pair of oxygen, they can attach to the iron surface, which contains iron 2+. And because these electrons are polarizable, and that does the job. We published in various journals, including corrosion science. This is another isoxazoline, different motifs by bis-isoxazoline here, and we got tremendous good results in HCl medium about corrosion inhibition. This is another one which is giving us very beautiful corrosion inhibition activities. And this is another motifs. Here we have a alkyne group, quaternary, aldehyde, everything is combined in a molecule. And that is helpful in arresting mild steel corrosion. Now, this is another group of compounds we made from isoxazolidins, and here, and they are also very nice. There is another groups here. Now we go to diethylene tetraamine derived compound for corrosion inhibitor. We can see here there is a thionine, methionine, and we made a polymer. And this is giving us, at 1 ppm of this polymer, it is giving us 93% inhibition. 10 ppm, it gives 99% inhibition. Now, here, this is the trick that lone pair of electron and sulfur, they can attach to the vacant d orbitals of iron, and it can protect the molecule. You see, the corrosion protection involves that you have to stop the cathodic reduction of hydrogen plus to hydrogen and anodic oxidation of iron to iron 2 plus. How do they do it? There is a hydrophobes, and they will go to the iron plate, and they will remove all the water layer. So that will be a hydrophobic barrier, and that barriers will remove water from the iron surface, and thereby they stop that half cell reduction of hydrogen plus. And there are other nitrogens, they can go and coordinate with the iron 2 plus, and they effectively do the job of inhibition of corrosion. These are groups here: diethylene tetra, diethyl triamine, tetraethyl pentamine. We have many corrosion active, and these R groups you can see here, they are hydrophobes. They can take care of absorbing onto the surface of the iron. Now, this is another group we have developed for corrosion inhibition in carbon dioxide medium. And there are other groups of compound containing benzamidazole, and here benzamidazole, another quaternary group that will impart water solubility. These are for 15% HCl, that oil reservoir, when they treat them to clean the reservoir, and then you have to protect the mild steel, and at 15% HCl and so much that you need to protect the steel. And this is here, this is one of our best compound we filed for patent, that is at 90 degrees centigrade, 15% HCl. It is giving inhibition efficiency of 93%. This molecule is so superb. Now here we have also made from cyclopolymerization some zeolite template structure directing agent, and that agent can make certain type of zeolite JSM5 with certain pore requirements that can selectively give us cracking of hydrocarbon to propylene. And this is here we did synthesis for membrane synthesis and modification. Is number 3 is a membrane, number 5 is a membrane. What do? We want to see in this membrane whether they can remove the priority metal contaminants like mercury and lead, and also they have to reject the proteins so that it will prevent biofouling. So it has given us good results. And here it is that we have taken this polymer 5 and we have blended with polyvinylidene fluoride, and that has improved the flux, the permeation flux, and it has improved because it does not allow any precipitation of calcium sulfate on the membranes or others, because these groups can take care of them. And this is here, this is hydrophobic carbon 12 that makes this compatible with this polymer membrane. Now I'll take you to kinetic hydrate inhibitors. You see, when you pass gases through pipelines, and these hydrocarbons, methane, ethane, propane, they make clathrates with water, and they becomes ice like this thing. It's amazing, I don't believe it, but this is how it looks like, that they make clathrates. And this is a problem. So you need to develop inhibitors that can inhibit the formation of clathrate in the gas pipeline. We have made about 65 kinetic hydrate inhibitors for Saudi Aramco, and when we made from 1 to 65, we found out that this hydrate here, sorry, this hydrate, when we made this hydrate, this is the number 65. And that is the last sample we make, which turned out to be one of the best available in the world. Best available in the world. Why? The company said that it can work up to 8.5 degrees centigrade cooling temperature. But most of the commercial ones, they work up to 12 degrees centigrade. But this is this number 3, the one we made at number 65. Last sample we tried, and this worked, one of the best in the world, which we got a patent and we published. And this is is obtained by free radical addition polymerization of these 2 monomers. And this is kinetic hydrate inhibitors. Now I want to go to antiscalant synthesis. You see, in the antiscalant synthesis, in the water desalination, you see in the water desalination, this is the membranes. The brine water goes there, and brine water has calcium and sulfate and carbonate, all these things. If they precipitate, then they will plug the semi-permeable membrane and create problem. So we have to stop calcium sulfate from precipitating. So we made, you can see here, we made numerous antiscalant, glycine based, and this is here aspartic acid based, glutamic acid based, methionine based, and we have made here aspartic acid based, glycine based polymers, low molecular weight, and we have made another kind of, we introduced this number 5 as a polymer in the literature, the first example of bis-zutyranic. This number 5 is the first example of bis-zutyranic motifs. Now, all these molecules I've shown you, they are very effective antiscalant. And one of the best antiscalant we have got is this one. This one, in a calcium 2600 ppm, sulfate 6300 ppm, we can see 1 ppm of our polymer can stop the formation of calcium sulfate precipitate. Now, this is here conductivity. When the conductivity decreases abruptly, that means calcium sulfate forms and ionic concentration decreases. That indicates it is the formation that is up to here. It is up to 70 or 80 minutes. It is working at 1 ppm. How much minutes you need? You need 15-minute duration. That's how long it stays in the osmotic chamber. If you take one commercial, you can see it's surviving about 20 minutes. This is the blank. Immediately it fails. And our one, this one is this can be made in multi-kilogram and industrial scale. This is a one-step process, and this does the wonderful job. Now, this is here, we analyze them, that they disrupt the formation of this is blank, and they disrupt the formation, the morphology of the calcium sulfate changes, and so they stop growth for this molecule. Now, this is here Mussel-inspired biomimetic polymers. You see, Mussel in a rough sea, they can stay there in the adverse condition because they release some protein that has catechal moiety, and that gives a adhesion properties. So we have developed this molecule. We got this oxide, sulfurol oxide from this natural, and we made this polymer, these polymers here, and with this double bond is elaborated to give you plus, and this double bond is elaborated to give you minus, and then plus and minus, when they combine, they make a coacervate, they become solid, and this is the thing which will do the job of adhesion. This is a biomimetic polymer. And we have done this thing also, the same thing that can be used, and we are in the experimental stage of testing it, that whether they can make coacervate and do the adjacent properties. Now, this is where I end. I have developed materials for sustainable future that will take care of the water remediation. We have anti-scalant. We have so many things we talked so far. And that I am coming here and just telling you that I am working here in the Middle East. And this is here on the desert land. Who says there is no beauty, color, or scented air? Wearing the golden necklace, the sky you are kissing, the tired birds will come to enjoy your beauty. And then I thank the department chemistry. I thank our president of our King Fahd University and the dean of College of Chemicals and Materials, chairman of chemistry department for their continued sustainable efforts to facilitate the research. I thank Saudi Aramco for giving us grant. I thank my audience and the organizer of this symposium, and thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for this interesting speech. If there is any question, please, you can write it on the chat or you can raise your hand. So it seems that everything was so clear and there was no question so far. Okay, so our last speaker for this session is a great person before being a distinguished professor. He is Dr. Mozahar Hossain, who is a professor in chemical engineering and affiliated of the Center for Refining and Advanced Chemicals at King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals. Before joining KFUPM, he worked as a senior research engineer in Headwaters Technology Innovation, New Jersey, USA. He worked as a senior research, as I said, engineer and Headwater Technology Innovation, New Jersey, USA. Dr. Hossain received his PhD degree from the University of Western Ontario, Canada, Master from KFUPM and BS from BUET in Bangladesh, all in chemical engineering. He also worked as a visiting researcher at the PSE laboratory, Hokkaido University in Japan. Professor Hossain is a registered professional engineer in Ontario, Canada. He is a subject editor of AJSE and editorial board member of International Journal of Chemical Reactor Engineering and Catalysts. Professor Hossain also served as guest editor of Renewable Energy Elsevier. Professor Hossain's area of research are catalysis and chemical reaction engineering. Last 20 years, he has been conducting research on hydrocarbon conversion to produce variable chemicals, H2 syngas, CO2 capture, and use of biomass gasification. He supervised and co-supervised 25 MS and 5 PhD students, published over 135 referred articles in reputable ISI journal and more than 150 conference contributions. He is lead inventor of 12 USA issued and 15 filed patents. Professor Hossain's presented invited lecture in several occasions at CSCHE in Canada, CACST in Riyadh, University of Bahrain, and JCCP Japan. Dr. Mozahar, it's all yours, and we are looking forward for your lecture or your speech.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Basim, for your generous introduction, and welcome everyone. Today I'll be talking about catalyst design for CO2 mediated oxidative dehydrogenation to convert light alkanes into olefins. All these are connected to address on problem and create two opportunities. The problem is valorization of CO2 according to the report here, International Energy Agency. It shows almost 32 gigatons of CO2 that are being released. That can be, there is a huge problem for greenhouse emission impact. So that can be considered as much as to be converted into useful chemicals with the help of natural gas, which has almost 200 trillion cubic meters available, and 50% of it can be recovered. So here we would like to talk about the approaches in terms of catalyst and reaction engineering to put these two things together to produce valuable chemicals. So here you can see CO2 can be combined or interacted with the hydrocarbon from natural gas or shale gas. And interestingly, this does not require additional hydrogen. And the olefin that can be further processed to produce a wide range of product. And one can see here the demand for these chemicals are growing significantly. And the projected, in terms of dollar value, the projected number is 200, almost 30 billion by 2030. And this approach also, in addition to contribute to the CO2 mitigation, this is also consistent to meet the growing demand of olefin and through on-purpose production approach. Now, when someone think about conversion of the light alkane into olefins with CO2, for example, here propane can interact with CO2 to get propylene, and propane can also be dehydrogenated to get propylene and hydrogen. So ideally, these are the two desired reactions, and of course, these are endothermic reaction, needs energy externally. The unfortunate part is, in addition to these two desired reactions, there are other reactions. I mean, there are so many other reactions they are possible under the reaction condition. So, for example, here propane can interact with CO2 as dry reforming to get carbon monoxide and hydrogen. Propane can also react with CO2 again to get CO and water. There are possibility of cracking of propane to get ethylene, which is desired. However, it may contribute for product separation. And there are, of course, set of other reactions, which most of them are undesired. And as we can see in the right column, most of them are endothermic, with few exceptions, they are exothermic. So therefore, it is very important to understand that how we can maximize the desired reaction and tackle the undesired reactions. So in order to do that, one can think about or consider the thermodynamic simulation using Gibbs field minimization approach. So here you can see two sets of plots. First one is A and B for ethane, and the second C and D for propane. And here we can see clearly that at when temperature is going up, ethane conversion goes up, similarly propane. And also, if you see the three curves, red, blue, and black, with increasing CO2 to hydrocarbon ratio, higher conversion can be achieved at lower temperature. However, the issue is when we achieve higher conversion, that not necessarily has been reflected as a selective product. If you see figure B, ethylene as a product, and if we follow the red line, almost no ethylene. So most of them are converting into hydrogen and carbon monoxide. Same case for propane. With higher CO2 to carbon ratio, conversion can be achieved at lower temperature. However, the product will be selective more towards hydrogen. So it is very important to now decouple these reactions and catalyst with the help of catalyst. And also, in order to make it realizable, we have to have efficient catalyst to control the kinetics in favorable direction. Now, one can think about when one think about the catalyst, this thing needs to be taken into account. First, already I mentioned, decouple the reaction network to minimize the undigested reaction. The catalyst that favors the cleavage of carbon-hydrogen bond, and it also attack carbon-carbon bond. Between these two, carbon-hydrogen bond cleavage is more desirable. However, in reality, both takes place. So therefore, it becomes very complicated to control and to control the carbon-hydrogen cleavage, and at the same time, we allow a minimum amount of carbon-carbon bond cleavage. So when someone design a catalyst, these things needs to be taken into account. And of course, in addition to catalyst, we also have to keep in mind that these are exothermic reaction. So we have to supply energy externally. And of course, catalyst has to secure high olefin selectivity, and they have to be stable. So the last 3 points, these are critical factors for economic viability. Now, the prospective solution, of course, one can consider the design of efficient catalyst, and also the configuration or design of novel reactors, and of course to optimize the reaction condition. Now, when we think about a catalyst, we have to understand the mechanism, and that will reflect on catalyst formulation. So here in this slide, I'm going to discuss about the reaction mechanism involving single site mechanism. So the left figure, here you can see you have one metal that goes in redox cycle. And in first cycle, it interacts with hydrocarbon to get the corresponding olefin and water. And then the catalyst becomes reduced. And the reduced form of the catalyst can also contribute in dehydrogenation. So this is also desired reaction. Now, once the catalyst is reduced, in order to continue the cycle, that needs to be reoxidized. In this case, the reduced catalyst can be there is another option in single site mechanism. So here, in the first cycle, instead of metal oxide, in this case, hydrocarbon can interact with this way. A Lewis acid site will be forming, and that Lewis acid site can interact with CO2 and give the site back, and this way cycle continues. In the next slide, here we can see two metals, and this is so-called synergic redox catalysis and coupling between two redox centers. Here you can see metal 1 or metal oxide 1, it interacts with the hydrocarbon to get corresponding olefin, and then the reduced form of metal, again, it can interact with hydrocarbon to dehydrogenate the olefin, the alkane to alkene. And now this reduced form of the metal can be reoxidized by a second metal, which is already oxidized. And this way, this metal will be going through the cyclic reduction oxidation. And the second metal will transfer oxygen to the first metal, and after reduction, it will interact with CO2 to reoxidize it again. So this way, there is a synergy that can be established to continue the process. There is another mechanism here. They work. This is just like cooperative role. So in this case, hydrocarbon can be dehydrogenated. So in this case, the reduced form of the metal to get olefin, and this way it will produce hydrogen, and hydrogen can interact with CO2 in a reverse order gaseous reaction. And then another one where hydrocarbon can be dehydrogenated to form hydrogen and olefin. So in this case, olefin can, instead of hydrogen, olefin can react with CO2 to achieve CO and hydrogen. So this way, the cooperative role can be established, and one has to remember in this case, the loading of the second metal play important role, that which reaction is going to be dominating. Now, in addition to mechanism, now the type of oxygen that is going to interact with the hydrocarbon, that is also very important in order to achieve the selective product. So the oxygen, when it interacts with metal, the first it will absorb on the surface, and then gradually it will interact with the active species and become lattice oxygen. So now this way we can have three types of oxygen. One is the adsorbed phase of oxygen, which are basically very reactive and however not selective. So they interact with the hydrocarbon, both alkane and alkenes, to produce a complete combustion product, CO and CO2. Now, those oxygen who escape this adsorption phase, they may go for interaction with the active site, become lattice oxygen, and there are possibility of two types of lattice oxygen, electrophilic and nucleophilic. In electrophilic, they are electron deficient, and these are highly active. However, these are poor for oxygen olefin selectivity. So these are not desirable. However, in terms of conversion, these molecules, these lattice oxygens are good. So one can consider this in a very controlled way to secure high conversion and get good or appreciable selectivity. Third type of oxygen, which is nucleophilic lattice oxygen, which is electron rich, it has moderate metal oxygen bond strength. They give moderate activity, however, high olefin selectivity. Now, in order to achieve this, one can think about the catalyst design. Now, in catalyst design, there could be alternative approaches in order to secure the desired mechanism in order to get the selective product. And always the target is to activate CO2 and the carbon-hydrogen bond of the hydrocarbon. And all this can be achieved by using an active phase and support. So there will be two components. One is the active phase, which is metal, and the support, it can be alumina, silica, and so on. Of course, the synthesis method and the precursor use and the subsequent treatment also play a major role in terms of the selectivity of those catalysts towards a desired product. So here, in the first figure, one can consider different approach of having or adjust or designing the catalyst. First one is by adjusting the oxygen mobility, by changing the charge transfer, proton transfer, creating the defect, of course, play with the dispersion, balancing acidity, and then also interfacial synergy. And the second type here, it shows the isolation of active sites, and there are different approaches for doing it. One is in the first one, it shows the deposition of the active site inside the channel of a support. So this way, these support, they do not see each other. Another way is by using a dopant to separate the active sites. And the third is by putting an interfacial layer to minimize the metal sulfur interaction and also play with the dispersion. The third category is the modification of the support. So it can be used as single support. It can be tuned by using more than one support material. It can be also adjusted. Morphology can be adjusted of the support material. It can be done by control treatment, by thermal and any other chemical means. It can also be treated to create vacancies, and hyperactive sites can also be controlled by carbon deposition, which is deliberate carbon deposition. Here we have some examples. In the first example here, the active sites, which are chromium, they are isolated using a MCM41, and here chromium loading was kept constant, and the metal and its dispersion was further controlled by using a second support, which is titanium. So here, the reducibility of the catalyst was controlled by adjusting the titanium. And we can see here this blue curve, which has a small amount of titanium, which is on 0.9. There is a peak at 400 degrees centigrade, and which has a good reducibility that has been reflected in ethane conversion. And you see here on 2, 3, the blue curve, it gives higher ethane conversion. Now, in terms of product selectivity, all these catalysts with different different titanium, but constant chromium loading give same ethylene selectivity. That means here titanium plays a role in terms of, bringing the available lattice oxygen, and a small amount of titanium is doing a good job compared to a higher amount. And of course, the selective sites are remain unaffected by the variation of titanium. Here, the control of the active site has been investigated by masking or by controlling a second metal. So first, Syria was used, which is a good candidate as a redox metal. So it can offer reducible oxygen easily. However, when we have too much oxygen that will be provided to hydrocarbon, the possibility of complete oxidation is there. So here, introduction of carbon help to control that, and it also create a situation to prevent coke formation. Consequently, the selectivity of the product has been significantly increased in case of the iron modified Syria catalyst. Another approach is balancing the oxygen carrying capacity, and this again it goes back to the reducibility of the catalyst that can be achieved by using a second metal. So in this case, different chromium was promoted with different oxygen carrier or support, in this case Syria, and then SR, SN, and zirconia, and so on. The black line, which is for I believe this is zirconia, which brings good reducibility of the catalyst, and that has been reflected here as a good conversion of in this case ethane and CO2. Acidity is another important parameter that needs to be looked at. We need some acidity for conversion of hydrocarbon and carbon dioxide. However, too much acidity may create problem. So in this case, the support was the acidity of the support or the catalyst has been adjusted by using different materials, silica, titanium, zirconia, and so on. So in this case, silica has been shown to be more preferred to disperse cobalt, in this case active phase, and that gives the highest olefin selectivity, in this case propylene. And the other, the acidity was not favorable in terms of higher olefin selectivity. The morphology can be also adjusted here. So this example, it shows the dispersion of Syria zirconia on aluminum nanoflake. And in this case, the support was varied. And one can see here this blue line, the dispersion, the adjusting the morphology help a good dispersion of Syria zirconia that has been reflected with a stable conversion and product selectivity. There is another interesting approach in catalyst design. So it is just like a combination of two materials. It's just like a dual functional. One is completely dedicated for adsorption of CO2. So that will hold CO2. So instead of, it can be just like circulated between two reactors. In one reactor, it will just like a hold CO2, and when it comes to the ODH reactor, and that CO2 will be increased. So that CO2 will be converted upon interaction with hydrocarbon. So this figure, it shows the uptake of CO2 by a material here. This is a basic material. And then when the CO2 adsorbed material was exposed, that CO2 has been converted, interacted with hydrocarbon to give different product. So here you can see the storage of CO2 on the basic material can play a significant role in terms of achieving good conversion and selectivity. And of course, one has to take into account of the concentration of CO2 in this case, and maintain a proper ratio of hydrocarbon and CO2. Now we can compare different catalysts in terms of the conversion and selectivity. So in this chart, we try to plot different catalysts from our group and from the literature, and it is clear that it is all over the map. So when in this case propane conversion is high, the selectivity drops, and most of the most of the catalysts perform well in terms of selectivity at low conversion. Now, in order to further evaluate these catalysts, one can consider calculating yield. And here we can see the yield for some of those catalysts. In this case, vanadium on alumina yield is less than 20%. And when vanadium was promoted with zirconia and deposited on alumina, GSM5, yield reached to about 30%. Gallium also can play an interesting role on vanadium-based catalysts to achieve a 30% yield. Iron has been shown to be poor activity and selectivity. However, when it's combined with Syria, it shows some good activity. There is another class of catalyst where the yield is significantly high. In this case, chromium oxide on silica, it shows 60% yield. And another catalyst, which is molybdenum on lanthanum modified alumina, this shows almost 40% yield. Now, if someone compare this chromium catalyst and this molybdenum catalyst, of course, chromium is outperforming here. However, one has to consider the toxicity of chromium. So in that aspect, this is, we believe, a good catalyst to pursue in order to further enhance the yield. And in order to look into a little bit more on that catalyst, when lanthanum loading was increased, the conversion of in this case propane was decreased. However, the CO2 selectivity in this case decreased and olefin selectivity increased. By the way, this one without presence of CO2 in the feed. And when CO2 was introduced in the feed, things have been changed significantly in terms of both propane conversion and propylene selectivity. Both are significantly increased due to presence of CO2. Now, finally, we can summarize the whole strategy in terms of conversion of CO2, with light hydrocarbon to produce alkane. So first, one can consider the active sites. So in terms of active site, moderate concentrations are preferable to achieve good activity and to achieve the conversion of carbon-hydrogen bond on and CC bond cleavage. Adequate porosity is also important to offer the adequate the movement of the molecules, especially when you have higher hydrocarbon, and of course to minimize the mass limitation. Another thing needs to be taken care is the diversity of the active sites, because when you have active sites, they are very closely dispersed. There is a possibility of agglomeration. So that can be adjusted by using a promoter or modifier in order to isolate those active sites. Acidity is another important aspect. The both conversion needs acidity, but too much acidity brings cracking intermediates, which are undesired. And the synergy of the support and metal oxides are very important here, because metal oxide that brings lattice oxygen for hydrocarbon conversion, and too much surface oxygen will be less favorable, because that creates fully hydrogenated. So a balance of oxygen carrying capacity and the acidity is very crucial here. And finally, the synthesis route is the key here in order to achieve all these things. And flush the particle size, surface area, the interaction of the metal and support, the morphology of the catalyst, and so on. I believe this is all we have. And then finally, I would like to acknowledge these people who were a partner and collaborator in different stages in order to conduct this research. Professor Hugo Dilasa from Western Ontario, Dr. Samir Al-Ghamdi from Saudi Aramco RNDC, Dr. Basama, colleague here, who was very helpful in terms of collaboration and supervising the student. And these are former and present student, Dr. Adam Sagir, Yahya, who has done excellent work, and he's almost ready to present. And Majid Balogun, he was also excellent of doing this molybdenum-based catalyst development. I think this is all we have. Thank you very much for your attention, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you. Dr. Basim, I cannot hear you.
Sorry for that. Thank you very much, Dr. Mozahar, for this informative presentation. And if there is any question, please write it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Any question from the audience? It seems that everything was clear, and there is no question that I can see. This will conclude our session 2 from this symposium, and I want to thank all the 3 distinguished speakers and all the attendees. And we are looking forward to seeing you in session 3 that will start at 6 o'clock this evening, inshallah. I wish you all the best and have a nice weekend.
Thank you.